for the District 2 Commission seat in the city of Lake Worth Beach. I'm Steve Bosquet, the opinion editor at the Sun Sentinel. With me are Dan Sweeney and Pat Beal of our editorial board, and the two candidates in this race, the incumbent Christopher McVoy and challenger Carla Blockson. Let's begin with you, Ms. Blockson. First of all, thanks a lot for attending this discussion. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about District 2.
I have lived in Lake Worth for the past 28 years. I came to the city when my husband was awarded the position of fire chief. I am very active. I am for District 2, we have 110 homes in our development. I've been the president of our homeowners association for the past at least 7 or 8 years. I serve on the CRA for the board chair for that as well. And I serve for the Salvation Army, the treasurer for the Salvation Army. I've done many projects, and in our district, we recently had the sustainability and master plan our parks. So I organized the group to have people come from the different neighborhood associations so we could give our input to make sure that our voices were heard.
Okay. In your questionnaire to us, you said, and I quote, you cited your ability to bridge gaps, build capacity, and consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Give us one tangible example of that.
Let's see, when I joined the Salvation Army 3 years ago, we did not have kettle season last year. And so what I organized was a program services committee, and we started meeting earlier in the year so that we would be prepared for kettle season. And we had monthly meetings. We decided what stores we were going to use. And this is a board of 7 or 8 people. So I not only had to convince them that we were all going to volunteer, but we were going to recruit all of our friends. And I'm happy to report that as a result of that, we raised $81,000 this year, and we raised $0 last year. And so that's an example of bridging those gaps.
You raised $81,000 for the Salvation Army in Lake Worth Beach this holiday season?
Yes, for the kettle season in our core, yes. And our core goes from all the way down to Boca. So it was over that area, but the city of Lake Worth Beach really did well.
This is getting way off topic, I'll concede, but I'm just curious about this, Ms. Blockson. How often does a retailer say, sorry, we don't want the Salvation Army in front of our store? Customers don't appreciate it. You're harassing people. We don't want you around here. Does that ever happen?
It does. We have one development that would not allow us to ring there, but that is extremely rare. We probably ring at 90% of the places that we act. Most people were receptive, and most of the people that were coming in the stores were very receptive.
Have you run for elective office before?
I ran for this twice, yes.
Okay. What feels different about this campaign compared to the others, if anything?
Number one, it's single district voting this time. And so it's a smaller audience. A lot of the positions in Lake Worth were chosen by people in certain districts. This time, the people who have skin in the game are actually the ones who are going to be voting. The people who need representation are going to be the voters. So I think that that's very different this time. And I'm far more well known than I was before.
Okay. We'll come back to a lot of these issues in a moment. Let me welcome Chris McVoy. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Give our viewers and give us a sense of your background, your history with the city, and why you're running again.
Okay, thank you. I'm a environmental scientist, doctorate in soil physics, hydrology. I was sent in 1995 by the Environmental Defense Fund to provide science support for Everglades restoration to the broader environmental community. I was parked at the Water Management District, became very intimately involved in the whole, one of the largest environmental restoration processes around, did a number of different types of research, and one of which wound up being a book that has become the source for what were the Everglades originally like. So guiding to some extent, if you want to restore original conditions, people get the purple book and start reading that. I also developed a reputation as the father of flow. I managed to kind of redirect in a fairly fundamental way the Everglades restoration process from an emphasis just on water depth to water flows. It's called the river of grass, not the lake. I moved to Lake Worth on the recommendation. People said, I think you're pretty interesting. Lake Worth is pretty interesting. I think you'd like it there. I began renting in 97, bought a home in 2003. Got involved with protecting our beach. There was an attempt to commercialize the beach at that, couldn't tell you what year, but a long time ago, and eventually was asked to run for the commission, served from 2010 to 2017, and came back in 2021. Obviously, I bring a lot of technical expertise, but I also bring a very broad, multicultural, international approach. I've lived in a number of countries in Europe, also in India, Costa Rica, and Mexico. I'm fluent in Dutch, German, French, and Spanish. Dutch and German don't do you much in Lake Worth, but French and Spanish. French gets you quite a ways with Haitian Creole. Spanish, obviously, is very relevant to our community. The technical expertise, where that comes in, is often it influences how staff deal with me. They know that I know a lot of things, and that makes it a little less likely that, yeah, you get the idea.
All right.
No, that's fine. That's good.
Okay, very good. That's a good overview. You started renting in Lake Worth back when it was known as Lake Worth, period, in 1997.
Correct.
So you've been in the city for a good quarter of a century. Tell us culturally, economically, demographically, however you like, tell us the most fundamental ways that, and the major ways that Lake Worth is different today from the Lake Worth you found in 1997.
I don't know about from 1997. People tell me a bit before that, I couldn't tell exactly when, that it was very different, especially downtown, that there was much more of a crime problem, that it wasn't all that well attended. I did not see that part of it because I came a little bit later. I would say that changes are somewhat demographic. We've changed a bit we've certainly changed a lot in more recent years since the pandemic and during the pandemic. We had a lot of influx of folks with greater resources that helped, as in all of South Florida, pushed up housing prices greatly, both for purchase and for rental, and that's had a big influence on the city. We also had a lot of development of building houses. Unfortunately, most of it market rate, not houses, but housing, most of it market rate, which has certainly, there's a market for that, but there's a much greater need for affordable housing or workforce housing, but especially affordable. That we're still behind on, but making progress on it.
Let me bring this conversation down to City Hall for a moment. You've got Jamie Brown is still your interim city manager, correct?
Correct.
And the last city manager was terminated. It was a big news story at the time when it happened.
Correct.
Jamie has been interim city manager, it looks to me like, for more than a year. Tell us,
slightly more than a year, yes.
Slightly more than a year. Has the time come, Chris, for the city of Lake Worth Beach to decide whether to fish or cut bait with Mr. Brown and make him the permanent city manager there?
I would think so. We had started a process of, the process of finding a new city manager. And at some point, I couldn't tell exactly when it was, we kind of put a pause, if not a complete halt to that, because there was a feeling that Jamie was doing a very good job and we were all pretty pleased with it, and sort of in the if it ain't broke, don't fix it category. Let's stay on with that. I still hear him referred to as interim city manager, and I guess technically that's the case. My sense is that all of the commission is quite happy with how he's doing. I'm impressed.
Ms. Blockson, do you share that assessment? Is Mr. Brown doing a really good job as city manager?
I think Jamie does a good job as city manager, but I think that he does a much better job as director of public works. We need a We need to make a decision. We need to hire a city manager. We need to have someone who has more of a professional background in managing a city. Jamie is very good at doing what he does in public works, but he's feeling a need. But he also wants to go back to the job he has. I've talked to him and he has no interest in being a permanent city manager. And the purpose of having an interim city manager was because we had made a hasty decision in firing the last city manager, and we needed to have him step up to the job. This is not a permanent solution to our problem. I think that we do need to have a new city manager who is completely vested. Jamie has one foot in his old job and one foot in his new job because he does both. And that's not the job of city manager.
If I might comment.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. I interact with Jamie multiple times a week, whether directly in our weekly meetings or phone calls or emails, a lot of contact. I have not heard that he is in any wish to go back to only the public works job. I think he's quite comfortable in the city manager job. I'm not hearing anybody else within the commission who thinks that he's not able to do both. We find that there's been no problem or slowdown in public works. So I would have a quite different view, and I've not heard from him at all that he was in a hurry, was uncomfortable with doing the job. I think he, as many of the staff, were extremely frustrated, along with a number of members of the commission, that the previous manager, who had all the credentials on paper, but nothing was getting done. We were losing good applicants because job applications weren't getting processed. A lot of other things were extremely frustrating, and it was night and day when Jamie came on. Things started moving that had been just stalled for long periods. So
Okay.
That's my take on it.
Thank you. Yeah, very briefly, the last city manager, Carmen Davis, was terminated on a 3-2 vote a couple of weeks before Christmas. Memory serves, in 2023. Mr. McVoy, were you in the majority that voted to terminate Ms. Davis?
I definitely was.
Ms. Blockson, was that the right decision by the city?
It was certainly a decision that the commission was able to make. However, Ms. Davis showed up to have a review of her performance, and instead she was told that she would be terminated. That is not how we should do business in the city of Lake Worth. We had other avenues that were available to us, such as putting her on a performance improvement plan. We did not give her time to correct the actions that we found that were unsatisfactory. That is not the way that we should do business in the city of Lake Worth. And you certainly, excuse me.
Yeah, hold on one second, Mr. McVoy.
I will not interrupt you, Mr. McVoy. Please do not interrupt me. I think that it's very important that we send the proper message to any employee of the city that we will evaluate their actions and we will work with them to try and get the job performance that we need.
Okay. I've got a brief follow-up question for you, and then I'll get back to Mr. McVoy momentarily. Ms. Blockson, this is a good time to ask you a broader question. The challenge is on the challenger to give voters a compelling reason why they should vote out of office an incumbent. You may or may not agree with my premise, but that's what it is. So this is a good time for you to give us sort of, we can get to specifics later, but what's the overarching, elevator pitch type argument as to why you'd be a better commissioner than Mr. McVoy?
I think I'd be a better commissioner because I'm willing to listen. Rather than talk or lecture, I try and listen. I try to ask people, what do you need and how can I help you? I have sensible solutions to problems. I try to focus on the priority of the city of Lake Worth Beach, such as not worrying about international politics or other state politics. I worry about what we need to do to move our city forward. And I think that I am committed to doing that every day, as I have been for the last 28 years. It's not something that I just decided to do over the last few months.
Okay. Does Mr. McVoy do too much talking and too little listening, in your opinion?
I do, but if you disagree with me, please just watch our commission meetings.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Mr. McVoy, go ahead. I'll give you the floor, sir. Go ahead.
As long as I've been in office, starting in 2010, I have always had my city phone directly forwarded to my cell phone. So I get calls from residents, from all sorts of people, but mostly residents, at all sorts of odd times, weekends, evenings, early mornings, whatever. I am very reachable, very listening. I frequently help residents out. People, or sometimes I find them. One woman, I was going into City Hall. She was in front of City Hall, clearly needed some assistance, and or it seemed like she did. So I started talking with her, trying to find out how I could help. That wound up helping her with some code issues that she was having trouble with the city. I get asked for help regularly. I'm always very responsive on that. I see that as a very important part of it. I had a resident, and often it results in policy changes. I had a resident who was putting solar on their roof and was contemplating buying an EV, and maybe an EV for a offspring. Our rules at that time said the way you can size your system, the maximum you can size it, is based on your past usage. And he said, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm planning to do more electrical things. We're trying to decarbonize the city. We are moving to decarbonized power sources. Why would you not want me to use more electricity? And I thought he had a very good point. So I brought it up as policy, and we got that policy improved. So yes, I do comment. I very much pay attention to national and international issues. I think they are relevant. Climate change, we're a coastal city. It's pretty important to pay attention to that. So I bring a different perspective to issues, but I'm definitely very accessible and responsive.
Okay. I'm going to pause here and I'm going to open the floor to my two colleagues, Dan or Pat Beal. Yep.
Yeah, I did have a question. You know, we talked about, or Steve already asked about Ms. Blockson's answer in her questionnaire, the question, what distinguishes you most from your opponents about her ability to bridge gaps and build consensus. Mr. McVoy, I wanted to talk to you about yours. You said that you're fiscally conservative, and that you support moderate incentives for well-considered new developments, but that you want to safeguard public money and have voted against using public funds for pet projects. You said my opponent, on the other hand, has voted to give millions of public funds to developers. In her official role in the Community Redevelopment Agency, she has voted multiple times in support of developer giveaways. These millions of dollars could be used to address road improvements, recreation programs, or supporting local small businesses. Can you please cite examples of times in which Ms. Blockson, in her role in the Community Redevelopment Agency, has done what you would call developer giveaways?
Yes, thank you for the question. A prime example is the Gulfstream Hotel, which everybody in the community very much wants restored, myself included. The developer came to the city and asked for quite a number of things, a long list of things, including access to the beach, access to the golf course, but also financial things. The commission at that time, of which I was a part of and encouraged this, said we need to bring in a professional negotiator to make sure that the city's interests are well represented. We managed to work that list down of what the developer was going to receive quite a bit lower, gave them all the votes to move ahead. The developer then went to the CRA and received millions in either tax breaks or direct contributions of various sorts. In the community, what I hear from people is developers in other parts of the country typically offer something when they come into community. We'll help you build a fire station. We'll help you build a library. We'll help do some of the road work, whatever. Here, they ask Lake Worth, and we sometimes feel like we're so unfortunate, we're so poor. We should be very grateful that somebody's coming. So what can we give them? I find lots of people are very unhappy about giveaway of public money, public tax money to developers. Maybe for affordable housing, maybe for senior housing, yes, but not for market rate things.
Okay, Ms. Blockson, could you address that?
W Moda, a current museum project, is another one that follows as an example.
Okay, Ms. Blockson, could you address those concerns? Like, as the head of the CRA, what sort of deals did you make with the developers or the renovators of Gulfstream Hotel?
I did not make those deals with the developer because I was not on the commission until 2023, I believe. No, 2022. So when the Gulf Stream first came to the city of Lake Worth Beach, I was not on the CRA. So those were not my decisions. However, the job of the CRA is to bring development to the city and increase our tax base. And that does involve compromise in actual use of public dollars and making public concessions to get those jobs to come to our city, to make sure that we have a pro-business environment, that we are willing to work with developers who want to come here. And so I think that as far as WMOTA is concerned, they are willing to invest $60 million in our community. They did not have to come here. And yes, it was an unsolicited proposal. However, we had 3 other developers who had come through an RFP and it did not work out. They were not a good fit, and they ultimately decided not to invest. So when WMOTA came before us and the Gulf Stream came before us, the job of the CRA is to say, how do we make this project come to fruition? It is not to put roadblocks in. And yes, there are things that we do ask for. And one of the things that I want to ask for with affordable housing is that we have the developer put in a resource center for the people that live there. We have them put in a doctor's office in that building so that they won't have to go out to see the doctor. Also to give them transportation services. So there are many things that the CRA asks for when a person comes before them. We certainly don't give away everything, and we try to do our due diligence. But when we make a recommendation, that ultimately goes to the city commission for them to decide. And that is their chance to say, let's do our due diligence and see what we're going to ask for. Because we only can vote for what the CRA recommends that the city do. The city commission is the one who makes the final decisions.
Mr. McVoy, you mentioned before Ms. Blockson's statement that the CRA does these giveaways. It could be for affordable housing, could be for other things, but still, it's taxpayer money, as incentives to developers. What about affordable housing, though? I mean, in every city, we'll stipulate that Lake Worth Beach doesn't have as massive a problem with affordable housing as some other South Florida cities do, but it's still an issue. And,
it's definitely an issue here.
Yeah, and no matter what city you go to, developers are often asking for some sort of deal in order to build something that's going to allow them to offer affordable housing while also maintaining profitability. So what do you say to that then?
Absolutely true. A developer has to make the pro forma work. I get that. And particularly for affordable housing, that's pretty difficult. It will almost always take some sort of assembling a package of help from either federal money, state money. We don't have enough funds to directly put very much significant amounts in. We have done things in our, I guess it's our code, our LDRs and so on, where if the developer is asking for more above what they have by right, we have what we call sustainability benefits. We have modified those in the last couple of years very actively to use it as a way to get them to commit to affordable housing within the project, and have found ways to buy some of that back down at the end of, say, the 20 or 25-year periods. So we've been pretty creative on that. That's not my concern. I think we do, and I think the CRA deserves quite a bit of credit on some of its affordable housing efforts. It's the market rate things or other types of projects that really, it's questionable whether that's sensible use of tax money. And process is very important. I, on Tuesday, said, hey, the state rules have changed. We can expect more unsolicited proposals, particularly for PP3s. And the deal on public-private partnerships is the details. WMOTA, the museum outfit that was mentioned, showed up asking recently, and it's in negotiation with our staff, saying, okay, we need a parking garage and we want 50 of those spaces to be free in perpetuity for our museum clients. Well, that was not ever part of the independent, there was no independent financial analysis pushed for by the CRA that Ms. Blockson could have pushed for. There should have been independent financial analysis looking at it, not just what GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, or Strong Towns say. Many PP3s are public giveaways under another name. Don't accept vague things like, well, it'll create jobs. That's too vague. Get a better, solid financial analysis of what are you getting, what are you giving, what risks is the city taking on, what risks is the private developer taking on, how are those balanced? That's where that's why I introduced a process, and I'm pleased to say that my commission, they all said yes, let's do that. Let's start putting a process in place for dealing with that.
I mean, certainly, you know, this editorial board, particularly in the city of Fort Lauderdale, but also elsewhere, has criticized on numerous occasions unsolicited public-private partnerships in which public land is used to build some private, you know, some private entity, from apartments to concert venues to so on and so on. But Ms. Blockson, he mentioned you in that answer. What could or should the CRA have done, or highlight what it did do in this particular case?
Are you referring to WMODA?
Yes.
Or just partnerships in particular?
Yes, the specific one.
Okay, WMODA came to us, it'll be a year ago in February, and actually they came before that. But over the year, they have met with the CRA every month, and they did a presentation to the public and the CRA. They've held numerous charrettes. They have talked to hundreds, probably thousands of people to get their opinions on what they would like to be seen in the city and what the needs were. As far as the financial analysis, those items were not asked for by the city, and they also met with the city staff. And if city staff is unable to negotiate, then we should hire outside counsel. I am not saying that the city staff was able to do all of the things that Mr. McVoy thinks that they were able to do, but they certainly could have been directed by the commission to hire city staff to ensure that all the questions were answered. When it came time for the final votes, then it was, oh, well, did we ask for this? Did we ask for that? We have been sitting at this table for more than a year. We should have asked these questions several months ago. And just as he raised these concerns then, recently, then he should have raised them several months ago, and we could have been working on these issues. Staff, the city attorney, WMODA, and the commission could have arrived at all of these consensus decisions months ago. And
Okay.
to say we didn't know that we didn't do these things timely, we are doing them, and the process still has to work out. And these devil in the details, they are things that we need to look at. And I don't know if they're asking inappropriately, but the city certainly can answer confidently to say, this is not something that we're going to allow. That's the process they're in now.
Thank you. Mr. McVoy, you look like you really want to respond to that. I was gonna pass it over to Pat, but if you have something you wanted to note as an end note to that, go ahead.
Yeah, there are some things that I would say are perhaps factually not quite right. WMODA only had one public charrette. They limited attendance. They did it very early on the process. They excluded certain topics like parking garage. We're not going to talk about that. There were no details at that point, and they did not come back when there were more details. I have talked to large numbers of the public, and people don't know about the project. I find that a very irresponsible way to do governance, that public money being given away, significant amounts. I see varying numbers, but they certainly are 2 to 3 million in land, several more million in other parts for some of it, several more million related to parking garages. Those are very significant numbers in our budget, and there is not widespread public support, and there's lots of lack of information. The independent, and that's the key, independent financial analysis should have been asked for by the CRA early on. It's important to point out that Ms. Blockson pointed out that there were RFPs. By all accounts, I helped get that process reversed. That was several years ago, because by all accounts, those RFPs were very poorly done. We had brought in Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, had very good charrettes, good widespread community involvement. The recommendation from the Treasure Coast Planning Council was get somebody very competent to write a good RFP and put that out. That was started and aborted when an unsolicited proposal came in. And my concern with all that is, as you well know, RFP process, it isn't perfect. It doesn't guarantee good use of public funds, but it helps a lot. It creates competition. It lets you check references. It lets you look at what other projects they've done, bunch of things, and it gets the multiple types of review. Unsolicited proposal, if nobody asks for a better process, you have a problem. Projects acquire momentum. The project says, hey, we have a deadline. We have to have this. WMOTA has been quite pushy. We have a deadline. We need this. Well, I'm sorry. The community needs to be an equal partner here, and not because WMOTA is asking for a lot of public subsidy. So that's where I have a difficulty with the way the process has happened.
Okay. Fair enough. I don't want to spend the whole time on this
Sure.
one subject. So, Pat, if you had other questions to ask, please go ahead.
Yeah. The Lake Worth utility. I mean, obviously there are some very ambitious plans that are underway, addressing both rates and service. So how would you characterize the progress to date? Is it where it needs to be? If it's not, what would you as a city council member do to get it where it needs to be? And Ms. Blockson, would you like to start?
Yes. I think that we've made a lot of strides in the city of Lake Worth Beach as far as our utility. Our rates are now comparable to FP&L. When we first moved here in '96, it was commonplace to have our electricity to go off. It doesn't happen as much. Well, we have tried to build up many aspects of that. We bought in Ed Liberty, who is one of the best people in the business and he's had many positions on the planning councils to make sure that we're doing things properly. I think that we're not where we need to be, but we certainly have made a lot of progress, and we're certainly attentive to try and figure out what needs to be done. We've also received 2 grants for our electrical utility. So we're very active in finding the money. It's not always that we're saying that we're taking our tax dollars. We've received, I believe, a $40 million grant regarding our electrical utility. And also when you were talking about affordable housing, I do want to say that the CRA receives many grants from the federal government, and we recently received the $4.4 million grant along with the city of Riviera Beach. And so our money are not necessarily coming from the backs of our taxpayers. We actively apply for many grants to fund our projects.
Okay. Mr. McVoy?
Thank you. And we should add a slight addition here. We do not only have a utility, we have 2 utilities. We have our own water utility, our own electric utility. On the water utility, through foresight of some of my predecessors, we have a reverse osmosis plant. That means for the forever chemicals, PFAS, we will be able to meet the EPA requirements of, and I think it's around 4 parts per trillion. It's a very low requirement. Our surface water and many other community surface water already has PFAS chemicals in them. We blend reverse osmosis from deep in the Floridan aquifer with surface water, and for that reason can meet it. So the water utility is in pretty good shape. We also recently completed certification that we have no lead pipe problems, so we're good on that one. We're pretty good there. On the electric utility, I have put a lot of energy into that. I was able to convince my colleagues to adopt 2035 and 2045 goals of 60% and 100% carbon-free generation. So that's not just for city buildings, that's for the whole city, as well as some of our out-of-city customers that we support. We are ahead of schedule to meet the 60% carbon-free. We have expanded, we've contracted on utility scale solar. A lot of that was due to my pushing. There was initially, when I came on the commission in 2021, Mr. Liberty had a moratorium on rooftop solar, was not doing anything for utility scale solar. I and others on the commission pushed very hard that we need to be moving in that direction, not just for environmental reasons and carbon reduction, but because solar is the cheapest source of generation at this point. So we now have utility scale contracts that have 20-year either flat price or 20-year known escalators in them that are pretty reasonable. which means that we are insulated from natural gas price fluctuations, much more so than we were when I came on. I've also worked very hard on trying to increase transparency in the rates. Ms. Blockson is correct that we've been lower than FP&L for a while. Nobody believes it, including my wife, but it is true. We are lower, and our reliability has gone up as well. How are we doing? My concern is that we've taken on a lot of debt to do those increases in reliability, and yet we will still be vulnerable to hurricane and big storm damages. And I want to make sure, I would like to have an outside technical audit, not a financial audit necessarily. I think we're reasonably okay on that at this point. We had some bumps, but I think we're okay on that. A technical audit of somebody who knows and is very familiar with upcoming technology, microgrids, distributed generation, distributed storage, and is able to evaluate, do we have everything in place, and are we spending the money so that we are fully positioned to take advantage of those oncoming technologies that we can expect? I think we are, but I would be more comfortable if we had an outside knowledgeable technical review of that.
Oh, thank you. You know, Ms. Blockson, you had mentioned pretty early on about, you know, national issues versus city issues. And sometimes you wake up and national issues are on your front doorstep. And Lake Worth Beach, as y'all know, has a robust immigrant community, and it seems almost a given that we are going to be having sweeps. And it seems almost a given that at some point those sweeps will involve Palm Beach County and some of our larger immigrant communities. And so I'm curious as to what concerns you may have heard from your own constituents, what concerns you have, and how this would or would not impact your specific district. And Ms. Blockson, if you'd like to start.
I think as the nature of our country has shifted, we have now made our victims our problems. We've identified them as not the they and the we. I think that it's unfortunate that we are going to have these sweeps. And how it's going to affect the city of Lake Worth, we have a large immigrant population. But when we take away these parents, what's going to happen to the children that are left? The children that are born in the United States who will not have people to live with and places to stay because their parents are not here. We don't stop and think about the seniors, how they're going to be affected. They may have to take on raising their grandchildren. They have limited income now. How are they going to be able to feed more mouths in a household that has less income coming into it? So we have a lot of issues that we have people living in fear. I work with a strong immigrant population, and they're worried that they can't go to church. We've directed them to say, now look at this, look at the schools, look at the churches, look at the places where people go for sanctuary, to say, let's send ICE there to make sure that we're rounding up all the people that are undocumented. Well, people who are undocumented had a process to become a U.S. citizen. We're now halting that process and saying, I'm going to round you all up and I'm going to kick you out of our country. Well, when they leave our country, there are a lot of jobs that they're doing that other people are unwilling and unable to do. What plan do we have in place for that? But how it's going to affect my city? We have such a strong immigrant population that we will be decimated if they round up all the people that live in our city and remove them. And that's not something that we can afford to do. Not only is it morally wrong, it's economically wrong.
Whoops, I just lost the audio. I saw Pat speaking, but I didn't hear it. Oh, you were muted. There we go.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. I agree with a number of Ms. Blockson's comments. I work very closely with the Guatemalan Maya Center that provides services of a variety of sorts, not only to the Guatemalan community, which is almost a fourth of our city, but also to a whole suite of other nationalities that we have in the city as well. Haitian, a fairly large Haitian population, and then lots of folks from a variety of other areas in smaller numbers. I also deal with parents of kids directly. As I mentioned, I'm fluent in Spanish. I was just translating at a traffic accident near my house the other day for PBSO. And yes, immigration comes in. Ms. Blockson is completely right. She perhaps forgot one issue, that there are lots of people, with a quarter of the population being the Guatemalan Mayan population, those people rent. The landlords of those places, if substantial parts of them get deported, who is going to live in those? How are those landlords going to receive income? Is that the biggest concern? No, certainly not. But it is a concern, along with the others that Ms. Blockson mentions, of there are many jobs. I don't see all of our American native-born population up on roofs for roofing in South Florida, picking tomatoes, picking green peppers, lots of things, and many other, more jobs that aren't necessarily unskilled jobs. So the question is, what are we going to do? I just wrote to the Archbishop of the Catholic Church last night, when I perhaps should have been doing more preparation for this. I wrote to ask that they formally declare Catholic churches sanctuary places. Many, many years ago, when El Salvador was having a lot of troubles, I was part in upstate New York of church sanctuary movements, of trying to physically give people a place where they were safe. We are already in discussions of how do you protect schools? How do you inform residents of what their rights are? Inform them of how best to deal with these things. Yes, you definitely need to go to your court dates, but here are the risks. And here are the risks if you don't go to your court dates. Ms. Blockson is right that there are a very wide range of people in different statuses. Some people are in progress. Many people are in progress on things. Some people simply don't have any American documentation, but they pay taxes here. They do a lot of things that need to be done, and we've unfortunately taken a very negative outlook. But I'm looking for concrete ways to help.
Mr. McVoy, real quick, you mentioned, just since you mentioned your letter to churches, are you aware of the Homeland Security's changing policy that schools, healthcare facilities, and places of worship are no longer off limits for immigration arrests?
I am aware. I'm also aware that there are legal challenges to that, and we'll certainly support them.
Okay, thank you.
Pat, you got some more questions, or?
Yeah, just one more. I think it's been about a year since there were some flyers, some political flyers that were making their way through Lake Worth. They appeared to show individuals who were probably homeless, and were clearly so high that they were not conscious. And the goal of the political flyers, or one of the outgrowths of the political flyers, was discussion that maybe the way to address addiction issues in Lake Worth and concurrent homelessness was to have PBO arrest more people. And it's been a year now. Is PBS arresting more people? Has that discussion stopped at City Hall? Mr. McVoy?
Yes, I am familiar with the flyers that were put out. They and similar things were put out by an organization called Prosper Lake Worth, which Ms. Blockson is closely associated with. Those caused a good deal of outrage in our community, that somebody would stoop low enough to use the unfortunate circumstances of people who are in a bad way for political gain. And something that frosts me a little bit is the people that were elected under that plan. I asked them to commit some of our ARPA funds, our public federal funds that we still had left, to do something for homelessness and services for that community of people in need. And the majority of the commission, 3, who all were at Ms. Blockson's kickoff party, voted 0 money to do that. So as far as the question of, is PBSO arresting more? PBSO will tell you, where are we going to put them? We don't have room. PBSO will arrest if that's the only option. And obviously, if somebody's doing something blatantly illegal and problematic, they will arrest. But they're looking primarily to try to get people to services if they can do that at all, because there just aren't the resources to put. The jail's not big enough. The homeless problem is way bigger than that. And I'm very concerned about the recent state law that passed, as well as some of the federal decisions, Supreme Court decisions, that push the homeless off of public land. It says it's illegal to sleep in public land. Well, people are still going to need to sleep. If they can't sleep on public land, they are very likely to sleep on the only alternative, which is private land, which is pushing people into neighborhoods and into yards and who knows what. That's why I pushed our commission hard. I met with the county to try and see, could we cooperate with the county or cooperate with nonprofits to try to provide services or housing plus services. Unfortunately, my commission didn't follow through on it.
Okay. Ms. Blockson?
Please repeat your question.
Yes, this has to do with flyers that were being mailed out, political flyers, about a year ago. And they showed individuals who were, clearly drugged, if not, and on public places. And the theory seemed to be, or the discussion and argument that followed was about whether it was going to be appropriate for Lake Worth to push for more arrests, And the reason this was controversial is because there was a question of, could these individuals benefit more from Lake Worth pushing for treatment? And so, I guess my question is, in the year since, Mr. McVoy is saying that you were associated with a group that seemed to be coming down hard on arrest versus treatment. But could you address that issue in general?
Yeah, let me address that issue first.
Okay.
I am in no way affiliated with Prosper Lake Worth. And Mr. McVoy, please do not say that again.
You were at meetings with them.
Excuse me. I was not at the meetings with them. I have never been in a meeting with Prosper Lake Worth. When they were formed, I did not attend the meeting. I spoke at the casino regarding the Gulf Streams issues. I did not attend a meeting for Prosper Lake Worth, and I do not condone negative campaigning. I was appalled at the flyer that was sent out. I don't think that you need to show people at their worst to make a political point. That is not me, and that's not who I am. So please do not say that again. And as far as being closely associated with the people, I had over 100 people attend my kickoff party. And yes, it was the 3 other people who sit on the commission. 3 of the people who sit on the commission. That's because I've gained widespread support by the things that I do in the community, the things that I bring to the table. It is not an issue of me versus you. It is that I believe in the city and I've worked hard to make the city a better place, and people are supporting me for that. I think that if the police presence, first of all, when we go to have an encounter with someone who is in a homeless situation, we have to say, what services can we provide and what services are they willing to take? The Supreme Court has dictated how we will handle this issue. I don't agree with it. I think that it's short-sighted because homelessness has to be a many-pronged approach, and it has to be the county and all the surrounding cities and all stakeholders finding a solution. It's not going to be us responding to what the Supreme Court has allowed us to do. Yes, you can move those people, but where are you going to move them to? How are you going to do it? And the police department will become a revolving door for them. That does not help them. And while they're in jail, they're not getting the social services or the mental health services that are often needed. So I think that it's wrong to say that this is the only approach. I think that we need to think about what is the best approach and one that will benefit the cities as well as the population that we're trying to serve.
Thank you.
Ms. Blockson, a brief follow-up. We'd like to know which members of the city commission attended your campaign kickoff.
The mayor and two of the other commissioners.
Oh,
Like their names?
yes, please.
Sarah Maliga and Mimi May.
Okay, right. Do you have the endorsements in your campaign from any of these individuals?
Yes, I do.
All three?
Yes.
Mr. McVoy, why would three of your colleagues on the Lake Worth Beach City Commission be supporting your opponent?
Because she would be a rubber stamp for the same views that they have, and they are not, that majority is not very happy to have somebody who is committed to transparency, to asking important questions, to asking for analyses, to considering other viewpoints. We've had a steady erosion of public participation, attacks on reducing public participation through a number of ways of rule changes. We just brought it up it just came up at the last Tuesday's meeting, and fortunately enough people in the community spoke out. I spoke out strongly that public participation is a fundamental part of giving people faith in democracy. It is wrong in our country to make people reduce their belief in government. You have to make it transparent. You have to encourage public transportation, and any moves away from that are the wrong direction, particularly now. Fortunately, that particular rule, we did better.
Give us one specific example of how the majority on the commission curtailed or in some way restricted public input.
We used to have, well, one was they restricted how many comments would be read if they were provided online. The proposal last Tuesday was we aren't going to read the online ones at all. That was fortunately reversed. There were proposals to move public comment to the last part of the meeting, which means, you know, somebody who's a working family not only has to come to the meeting, but has to sit there for hours to be heard. We used to have a provision that if a member of the public approached any commissioner and said, hey, I'd like to present some ideas on something or other, can you put a presentation on the agenda? We used to allow that. The commission changed that and said, no, you can only put something on if there's consensus by the whole commission. That is a very unfortunate way to restrict the variety of ideas that you want to hear in a vibrant, active community, which Lake Worth has been known for being very engaged. You want to encourage that. Will you sometimes hear some crazy ideas? Of course. Is that the end of the world? No, it's part of the price of good democracy.
Thank you very much. Ms. Blockson, I'm going to give you an opportunity to please address this assertion by Commissioner McVoy that you'd be a rubber stamp for the mayor and for the other commissioners.
I think anyone that knows me and has watched my career within the city of Lake Worth Beach know that I don't rubber stamp anything. I do my due diligence, I do my research, I talk to all parties and try and reach a consensus. If you follow the CRA issues, there have been many times that we have disagreed and I did not rubber stamp anything. I have a relationship with these women because we have worked on projects such as public housing, such as affordable housing, as something as simple as making sure to go out into the public and feed the homeless. I think that we have done things together that showed my character. They also know that I am not the type of person to follow the lead. If I were, I would have had the support of the people that Mr. McVoy has enjoyed support of, because I would not sell my soul for a vote. And that is one of the reasons that I lost before, because people felt like I would not play to get along. No, I'm not going to do it, and I will never do it. And to say that because they endorse me, it means that they feel that I will support their position. Maybe it says that they're tired of someone always saying no. And without not even going to CW MOTA and voting no against it. Not without dealing with all the issues that are going on in the city to say no from the beginning. My position would be, let's talk about it. Let's arrive at a solution that would work best for all of us. But I'm never anyone's rubber stamp.
Okay,
I did go see the W. Moda Museum before voting on it, so that's an inaccurate statement. I did attend a well-attended Strong Towns meeting last night, which was exactly to have discussion in the community of how to move forward. Ms. Blockson did not. I think one of the three commissioners already donated substantially to Ms. May's campaign. I beg to differ on the rubber stamp view.
okay. We're at the top of the hour and running out of time quickly. Mr. McVoy, if you know, I realize you're not affiliated with them, but the political action committee that Pat Beal raised, Prosper Lake Worth, which was a factor in the last election. Does Prosper Lake Worth still exist? Do you think it's going to be a factor in this election? It's an obvious question.
It is an obvious question. I obviously don't have any way of knowing the answer of will they be involved. My prediction would be absolutely. I would suggest strongly looking at their funding. There certainly is affiliation with the three on the commission, or at least two of them. And certainly Ms. Blockson has been associated with that. Look at their funding. Look at those unfortunate flyers that were put out. Look at some of the flyers that were put out on Ms. Blockson's behalf in previous campaigns. We'll give a sense of some of this.
All right. I wish we had more time, but there's another commission race behind you that we're going to prepare for. Greatly appreciate your participation. Please send us any follow-up supplemental materials. I can assure you we've got an open mind here. Very important city, and that's why we're taking the time to learn more about you and the issues that face your community. So